Hi, I'm Isabel Mirau. I am the founder of Debris DAO, and this video is the recording of our first and launching event of our organization. Debris DAO is an organization to promote sustainable space standards in the new space economy. And if you want to know more about what this is about and why we need sustainability in space, you picked the right video to watch. In the video description, you will find an overview of our whole event. So if you just want to watch the panel or just the part about our organization, feel free to skip the chapters you don't want to watch and just go right away to what you're interested in. However, Debris DAO is an organization to promote sustainability standards in the new space economy. And if you want to know more about what this is, why we need sustainability in space, and why we created this whole organization, you feel free to subscribe to this channel to stay informed about upcoming events. Find us on LinkedIn, join our LinkedIn community for shaping a sustainable space economy, and comment all your questions that we could cover in our next events. The next online event is going to happen this Friday at the 5th of April. And it's open to the public. So if you're interested in asking all your questions to space professional, if you're working in the field, and if you want to connect with like-minded people who are passionate about space exploration, but also about enabling a sustainable space economy to make this happen, we are your community. I really hope to get to know you, to receive your questions. Feel free to reach out to us. Also personally, you can find my profile on LinkedIn as well. I'm always very happy to learn about new organizations and professionals, engineers who are not only thinking about how to reach for the stars and make it possible, but also how to enable the long-term usability of space and the long-term accessibility of space, and how can we actually create a legacy for future generations and not just trashing this planet, trashing our space, and don't think about what's after us. And then see you soon. Opportunity to watch this later for people who can't be here today. Several people asked for recording, so yeah, we're gonna start a recording, and if there's anyone not happy with that, please let us know. So first of all, I'm very happy that you're all here. I see we have quite a lot of attendees from pretty everywhere in the world. Like we have lots of people from Europe, from the US. I know that for people in Asia, the time was not super suitable. Apologies for this, but that's always a thing when you try to find matching time zones. So quickly for today's event, I'm really excited to present our Debris DAO to you today. It's the first time that we make an event like this, and we want to share our initiative with the space industry and get your perspective on what we plan to do, talk about potential collaborations, opportunities to join us, and also speak about generally why and what we can do to establish a sustainable space economy. So first, we're going to talk a bit about why are we here today, why actually a sustainable space economy matters to us, and why we want to encourage this dialogue. We have a few speakers today. So we have Ahmed, he's the president from the Tunisian Space Association. He will talk about the role of space in a sustainable space economy for emerging space nations and emerging space actors. We will have a roundtable discussion on the Zero Debris Charter. I'm very excited about this particular because there's a very recent development that aims to establish a more sustainable space environment, and that's a very big challenge we are currently facing. So I'm really looking forward to the insights from our participants here. Then we're going to briefly introduce our initiative, the Debris DAO, and talk about what we are doing and how you can contribute and join us. And for those people who are actually very motivated to start right away and get involved and start doing things, we have a collaborative vision workshop afterwards. So we're going to keep this room open for those who want to get active and join us in developing actual vision on a virtual whiteboard. We're going to tell you a bit later of how that will work. So first, quickly about us, about the team. About me, I guess most of you know me from LinkedIn. So with a few I've been talking in person, but for those who don't know me, I'm Isabel. I have studied psychology and sociology. I have studied 2 years master in international relations and peace and conflict research, which I quit afterwards. I was a rescue boat driver and I volunteered in emergency response for quite some years. Then I did a DLT, like a blockchain scholarship at Frankfurt Business School, and I co-founded the Institute for Legal Transformation together with Dr. Abiy Haddad, who's also going to join us today, where we do governmental trainings in foresighted policymaking, which also kind of led me to think about space as an emerging governance area where we have to find solutions to enable sustainable access and use and a sustainable economy for the benefit of all. So then I would like to invite our team to introduce themselves. Starting with Benjamin.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you guys. So I'm a serial founder. I started out in the video games industry, did this for a few years, and moved on to investing into different spaces. And space is the one that I like right now. So it's a really cool topic for me. My end goal would be to have a very fancy space station out there. It will happen eventually. Let's see if I'm part of that. I hope so. And I hope to contribute a lot to the DAO. And over to our next person.
Thank you so much for being here. This is super exciting. My background definitely came to the aerospace industry from a bit of a mixed bag of marketing and finance. I'm currently involved with some really awesome analog research groups such as the Mars Society and the Analog Astronaut Group at American Public University, where I did my master's in space studies, focusing on policy and astronomy. I am super motivated to build a sustainable space economy. I'm very passionate about space debris, and I cannot wait to see how we can work together on this. Please stick around for the workshop and let's get moving. This is so cool. I'm so glad you're here.
Okay, I'm not sure if Zari is actually having their microphone on, but I can quickly introduce her as well. So Zari is supporting our team. She's mainly handling the back office. She's also here today to support in the chat and doing some surveys today with you. So in between, I'm going to ask some questions, and I hope you engaged and answer some polls. Zari is going to take care that this goes smoothly. So yeah, thank you also for being here. So that was quickly a team introduction of the Space Debris DAO. I'm going to talk a bit after what we actually do and what our team is about. But first, I would like to know a bit more about your background. So yeah, please either write in the chat a few words about you, why you're here today, why does a sustainable space economy matter to you, maybe some associations you have for this. Other than that, Sari will share a poll in the meeting room, so we can get some insights of how much you already know about a sustainable space economy, about the space debris issue we have, and also to get a better understanding of your perspective on this topic. Make some votings. So continue doing the votings and engage in the chat during the presentations. So in case it shows up a bit later, there should be the opportunity to vote also later on. So that today we have quite a big variety of people coming from different backgrounds. So first we're going to have a quick introduction of what's actually going on in space currently, and why today is quite a crucial moment in space history. So briefly about the background of how we actually got to talk about a sustainable space economy today. First, space exploration was largely dominated by military. It was happening mainly during the Cold War, where there was the so-called space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. And this resulted also then in the establishment of space agencies. So during the Cold War, we also had a progress in space policymaking, because obviously the global community was concerned about the use of space for malicious activity, for warfare. So we had, for instance, the Outer Space Treaty being formed in context of the Cold War and the militarization of space. And the Outer Space Treaty really is focused on a peaceful use of space, and it really has at its heart the benefit for all of humankind, which is a really beautiful message for a treaty, I think. Okay, so after the militarization, we kind of moved to the era of space agencies. Military was still present, but we have an institutionalization of space with NASA and other space agencies like ESA being formed. But the space agencies kind of came to the point that it was not really economic viable over time, and they required private partnerships to continue doing space exploration and science. So then billionaires and investors joined space and built their companies like the Virgin Group. We have SpaceX and also Blue Origin, like companies that were formed and also kind of enabled the ongoing exploration of space. So with SpaceX, we have the first economical, viable, reusable rocket that really dropped the launching costs. And because we have now the private companies that were able to make economical, viable space exploration, this enabled a whole new space age, which is also known as the new space economy, which many of you are part of. And now we are kind of entering the era where there are space startups. So we have like business incubator, particularly for space startups, which is very interesting. And many people expect that there's a big growth in this economy in the upcoming years. So here's a quick overview of like some of the expectations for the new space economy. Because of the decrease of launching costs and the decrease of satellite production costs, we see a huge increase of launches and also an increase of the space market size in total. So we have like many satellite companies. We have global communication, infrastructure, planetary imagery, also everything we know about climate change. Satellite data has been extremely valuable for this as well. And the use of space data is constantly growing. And this results in like, quite spectacular expectations from many forecasters. We have here an overview from the European Space Agencies, where they presented some expectations of the growth of the global space economy. And plenty of them predicted like even $1 trillion market sizes for 2040. And this is largely driven by companies and new investments into space. And why are we here today talking about space debris? This is because now that we put so much more things in space, in orbit, we also see a large increase of space debris. So only a fraction of all objects around Earth are actually functioning satellites. And lots of the debris created by launches, by dysfunctional satellites, and other things, they remain in orbit, and we don't really have economically viable solutions yet to remove those. So we see while there's launchings increasing, we also see, unfortunately, lots of objects orbiting Earth that can collide with each other and create new debris, but we don't really see an end to this development yet, which result in a scenario where we have the so-called Kessler syndrome, and space becomes kind of inaccessible for anyone because there's so many risks for collision that it doesn't really make sense anymore to launch new objects because the risk for collision is just too high. So this is kind of in contrast to these predictions of the economic growth, because when the costs for launching satellites becomes too high because the risks of collisions are too high, space is not really a viable economic environment anymore, and no one really can profit from space after all. And for anyone who maybe does not know really about what space debris is, Space debris is basically all non-functional artificial objects around Earth, some also re-entering Earth's atmosphere, and they either burn off or re-entry, mostly in our oceans. We talk about artificial objects like broken satellites, upper stages of rockets, and anything that cannot really maneuver anymore and is a hazard for navigation and other space objects. And these are the risks we are talking about. So actually in lower Earth orbit, which is the region where most new satellite companies are active, there's like 70% of objects there are space debris, and the costs for those debris is very high already. So in 2023, this was like a very unprofitable year for insurance for satellites, because we had more claims than raised in premiums, which is probably a growing issue, because it only gets more debris and more satellites and more objects. So the risks for collisions are even increasing if we don't find ways to build a more sustainable way for a more sustainable economy. Yeah, and this kind of raises the question, how will we make sure that space remains accessible and remain also be usable for our businesses, for the whole economy, to really reach this vision of having space as benefit for everyone, have this economic growth for all these companies. The kind of foundation in order to make this happen is to ensure that space remains accessible, so which is why we consider a sustainable space economy as a necessary foundation for having a space economy at all. We think that a sustainable space economy consists of three big things, which is space exploration, which is about research and creating knowledge, information about space, which is important for the space economy also, to know what kind of resources we're dealing with to know about the environment we are entering there. The economy is important to enable space exploration, because we need the economic viable launching systems. We need to have a return of the investment there. But also we need sustainability to enable the long-term accessibility of space. So there's really those three cornerstones that have to work together in order to create a sustainable space economy. So, and in order to get there, we assume that we need both technology, policies, and economic viability, creating sustainable standards. Those have to go together, those have to be aligned, because technology and rules are great that they are going to promote sustainability, but if those standards are not economically viable, most likely companies and space actors will rather try to find their way around them than implementing them. So we have to find and develop systems that are not just technologically feasible and have the rules in place, but also make economic sense for the actors. I would like to now go over to our first speaker today, Ahmed Fadhel from the Tunisian Space Association. And I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so Ahmed can start with his presentation.
Yes, perfect. We can hear you.
Perfect. First, thank you very much for having us actually in the DAO initiative webinar. We are very glad to participate to this important event, and would like to share our thoughts about mainly what would be the ideal role of emerging space nations in the development of adequate frameworks, legal frameworks for to enhance space sustainability. Some words about the Tunisian Space Association. We are a non-for-profit and non-governmental NGO that is, of course, based in Tunisia, working with brought actually a very large team of Tunisian students, professionals, researchers around the world in 4 continents. And actually we are working towards supporting, of course, the development of the Tunisian space sector as a new actor in the modern space sector, because Tunisia was actually one of the first countries in all the region that showed interest into the space sector through the creation of the Outer Space Committee for the Committee for Outer Space Affairs in 1984. And then the Center for Remote Sensing of Tunisia in 1988. But then, of course, with a lot of factors that influenced the development of the local space sector, led us to kind of stagnation until 2010, when Tunisia actually ratified 3 of the 5 UN-USA treaties for outer space, for the peaceful use of outer space. Including the liability treaty, and since 2010 until now, actually we had several initiatives, several projects, mainly in the academia and recently within the industry, with the launch of the first Tunisian satellite by a private company. We are actually one of the very few countries in the region that the first satellite is actually manufactured and launched by a private entity instead of the government, which we didn't see a lot in other African and Middle Eastern countries. So we have a kind of unique model, and now we have this situation where we have several governmental projects and initiatives, including the creation of a national space agency. We have the Tunisian Space Association, which is an NGO actually working with all the actors, almost from industry, academia, and the government. And we have some private entities also that are emerging, mainly in the applications field, but also some of them in the industrial field. But we are still really at the beginning, and it's very important for us. We are considering the development of international relations with other entities and from different types in countries, mainly in Africa, also in Europe, Asia, and all over the world. So this is the current situation of the space sector in Tunisia, and it's obvious that one of the main reasons that for which we did not see a huge development of the space sector in our country and in this region in general is that the people, regular population, actually the people did not know a lot about the importance of the space sector in their lives. They know that probably they get of course the link from the signal for TV from space, but they did not know much more about it. So this lack of know-how and just about it's about awareness raising actually within the population to get their support to develop a national space program, because there are a lot of decisions that should be supported by politicians, by decision makers, and they won't reinforce new policies without having the support from the public. So this is the case of most of the developing countries that struggled in the beginning to have a space program running. We are in between now in Tunisia, but we have very good signs actually for the development of our national space sector. But I take always Tunisia as an example of several other countries, mainly in Africa, Asia, and South America. So this is the first bottleneck that we are working on now to get engaged more with the public. The second one is the know-how, which is also very, very important to be able to launch, to operate satellite, to actually process satellite data, to develop new solutions and products that are based on GNSS signals, on Earth observation data, on several space technologies. So this is also very important. When you don't have enough know-how, it will be very difficult for you to have, even if you have the willingness to do it, you will struggle with it. And this is why, again, international collaborations are very, very important to be able to have the required skills and know-how to pursue actually the development of certain areas related to the space sector or within the space sector. So these are the main two facts. But now in most of the emerging nations among or developing countries that are having or starting or already started the space program, they are focusing a lot on these two aspects and having also a long-term strategy. Well, the issue with long-term strategies is that mainly we compare what our ambitions to what exists in other nations. But the problem is that we don't have exactly the same economic models. We don't have the same societal priorities. So it's not that obvious actually to establish a unique, to have a unique fingerprint in the space sector for the emerging space nations. And that's why this will bring us actually to what I wanted to also to highlight within the development and adaptation of the new legal frameworks. As you know, there are several guidelines that were implemented, like the space debris removal guideline in 2019, the long-term sustainability guideline in 2021. There are still guidelines, and the UNUSA actually they are supporting and they are raising awareness within member states within the United Nations to implement these guidelines on the national level within the as a national law, because for UNUSA, they do not consider that the treaties model that was developed in between the 60s and the 80s will work now, due to geopolitics, due to a lot of factors. So they are advising the member states to implement these guidelines as national laws. So these guidelines are not obligatory, but the idea is that the member states will be, most of them, aware enough about their importance and to adopt them nationally. Where to adopt them nationally, you need to have the adequate environment, and you need to have a legal body within the government that will facilitate the implementation and of these guidelines on the national level. And this is why actually creating a new space agency or space coordination office within the government is very, very important to ensure that the new countries active in the space sector will be in, will consider the most recent recommendations regarding space sustainability and space debris. So this is what we have to do. On the other side, I think it's very important also to consider, which is the second recommendation, is really to consider minimum flexibility for the current recommendations and guidelines that are developed. Why? Because, as I said, for emerging countries in the space sector, they have very few satellites in space, and they have experienced relatively much less within the space sector than spacefaring nations. So even if they have a contribution now within, for example, UNUSA, COPIOS, or with other organizations to the development of the legal framework for space debris mitigation and also removal, actually they still lack of experience to have an active contribution and significant contribution to the currently the laws that are currently being established. So for this reason, I think their contribution is still important, but we need to be able at, for example, in 5 or 10 years, once these countries that are starting now, when they have more experience and they will know better actually their needs and specificities to their situations as emerging nations, we need to be able at that time also to revise and review these guidelines that we are putting in place now. And this is to make sure that all countries, including spacefaring and also emerging nations, will all have equal rights within these frameworks. And this is something that I think it is very important to make sure that all countries have these equal rights to benefit from the space sector. So yeah, this is very one of the most topics I wanted to highlight. And there is something else, which is now I take an example of a country that would like to launch satellites. So the good thing, because we need also to build on the positive experiences. I think the most positive experience that we have in this regard is for the geo-regulation, because we have a lot of emerging space nations that already operate even more than one satellite in the geostationary orbit. The spectrum regulation is really well established, well distributed by the ITU. And we can see also within most of the countries that we have a body within the government that is coordinating the frequency allocation, and which is the point of contact with the ITU. And so this was very well implemented for the geostationary orbit. Now we need to build on this and make sure that within the LEO orbit, we do the same. And instead of this body that will govern the spectrum for the geostationary orbit, which will also be involved in the process, we need the local space agency or local space office that will actually make sure that the country, each country, the country where it is established, will have its rights actually protected, and they will benefit from the same rights as any other countries, whatever, without considering of the number of satellites that they operate. And one last thing I would like to highlight here. Well, there are two small things. So actually, the first one is about militarization of space, because we see that at least 4 countries already had these anti-satellite missile tests, and that generated thousands of debris. Okay, now there is this willingness initiated by the United States to avoid at least having these tests again. But the problem is that when a new country is trying to launch a small CubeSat with this size, and that so they have a lot of regulations they need to stick to, which are actually imposed by the entity that is launching this CubeSat or small satellite for them, because there are very few countries that have this capability to access to space and to launch satellites. So, okay, for new countries, they will respect the regulations. Otherwise, they won't see their satellite in space. This is very good, and we need to reinforce it. But at the same time, what about their rights in terms of the protection of their satellite? They have 1 or 2 satellites at the most, maybe 5 satellites as a new country active in space. So these fragments generated by the anti-satellite missile tests will be more harmful for their space program than for a country that has thousands of satellites. You see what I mean? So this is something that we need to consider, to take into consideration, which is the vulnerability of the programs for space programs within the emerging nations. They don't have the same budget allocated to the space development. So they are more in risk in case their satellite gets hit with debris. So we need really to take this into consideration, and to make sure that to involve these countries actually in the discussions, because they are also concerned. And this will also facilitate even the discussions between the larger nations, because these countries have also interest in the space sector, but which are completely different than a country that operates thousands of satellites, and like the classical, of course, and spacefaring nations. So yeah, this is also what I wanted to highlight. I think this is almost all from my side. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights. I think it's very important to consider especially the emerging space actors in these conversations, because yeah, as we just said before, space is currently growing, and we have like lots of new space actors, not just new space nations, but also new space companies, new space startups. So I think it's very important to have these emerging actors an active part of the discussion. So thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. So we don't want to talk just about the things that have to happen today, but we also want to talk about what already has been achieved and shaping a more sustainable space economy, and to talk about how can we implement and build on those things that already have been achieved. So last year I had the chance to attend the Zero Debris workshop at the STEC from, Ben is just sharing the Zero Debris Charter in the chat if you want to have a look on it. That was a big milestone for moving towards more sustainable use of space. And today we have our roundtable discussion on this charter, on the Zero Debris Charter. And I will now give over to Benjamin, who will moderate our roundtable discussion.
Yes. Hi, everyone again. So in this 30-minute roundtable discussion, we want to talk about the ESA Zero Debris Charter. We have only 30 minutes, so we want to make all of this very quick. We have a few people with me that will hold this panel. I can turn on their camera and be with me, and we will get right to it. What I suggest is that we do a short introduction of each of the panelists, that we have in about 1 sentence about them and why they want to participate in this panel. And I would suggest that we start with Tiago to get this going.
So, good afternoon. My name is Tiago. I work in ESA now for about 15 years, and the last 12 have been dedicated to space sustainability, still at the time that many people were not really considering it an issue. So thanks for the invitation to participate in this roundtable. I'll be also introducing to you the work I've been doing on Zero Debris and this initiative that Bella introduced just before. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, my voice is, I'm pretty sick, so that's why, excuse my voice. So my name is Dr. Abdul Haddad. I'm the founder of the Institute for Legal Transformation, where we focus on the law and regulation of the future. So we help governments and legal institutions or judicial institutions to shape the right mindset, the methods, provide the tools for them to work on regulation, which will help them to cope with exponential technologies and climate change. And space is one of the topics we tackle too, which is for sure, as Bella said, as Isabel said, that pretty important space economy is coming, and for there we need to prepare governments for regulating this space.
Thank you, Abir. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to participate to that roundtable today. I'm very excited to discuss that subject. So I'm the head of space for Beasley. Beasley is a Lloyd syndicate, so we're dealing in the matter of satellite insurance, and we basically allow space operator and new space company to develop their project and launch their satellite and their program. So that's where we intervene, usually early on in the project, and provide all sort of risk management services, and including insurance. I've got about 20 years of experience in the satellite industry, and I've been able to effectively gather a lot of insight about the development of space, the satellite industry, and the recent concern about sustainability in space due to the increased density of objects in low orbit in particular, but also in other orbits.
I think it's me now. Hey everyone, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you, Isabella, for the invite. So I work with Leo Labs. I'm in charge of sales for EMEA. I work in commercial, defense, and civil partnerships. When I joined Leo Labs, our mission has been to provide safety services and ensure the security and sustainability of low Earth orbit. And I work very closely with a lot of commercial companies, and generally we work very closely with our partners. And today, hopefully, I'll provide you some operational perspective on the issues of space debris.
So that sounds really good. Now, thank you for all the intros. I think the next step for us would be that maybe Tiago, since you worked a lot on the Zero Debris Charter, maybe you explain a bit what it is all about and how it works.
Thanks, Ben. So try to introduce it quickly. When we started a couple of years ago, talking inside ESA about zero debris as a vision, let's say, we wanted to go towards a future where, as an agency, we do not leave debris behind, and we design our satellites to contribute to the long-term sustainability of space. This was something that our management, and in particular Director General, were very proactive on, and they in the preparation of the member states ministerial council that happened in 22. We started working on defining what this actually meant in practice, and also trying to get to their support for such a commitment, because of course we represent our member states. And actually in CM 22, this approach got green light from our member states that encourage ESA to not only to develop this approach, but also to encourage other partners to engage in similar practices in the future. And that's the work we started doing, both internally and externally. The way we see this Zero Debris Charter was really a tool that ESA decided to facilitate. So it's in a way a bottom-up approach where we try to gather with us, with the European Space Agency, like-minded actors in the space sector, being it operators, regulators, designers, you name it. There was everybody in the room, and we basically opened the floor to say, let's work together and let's try to define measurable targets. And I think this is the first time that this was achieved, that we can aim at as a community, and that can guarantee the long-term sustainability of space. So our goal is to give a vision, and it's an ambitious vision. We know that we'll need to fight and to work hard to make it happen. But to have a vision for the next 7 years, to see where we want to go in terms of technology development, in terms of regulation, evolution, etc., with some specific numbers that will tell you, if we reach this, we have done a major step towards long-term space sustainability. So this was really the challenge. Thanks for projecting it, actually. I was going to do the same. And so in this document, that is a 2-page document, that was the work of, we gathered inputs from about 100 different organizations, even though 30 were really active in workshops, discussing in detail what would end up in the text of this charter. You will find these guiding principles that are more generic principles we want to aim at, and then what we defined as a jointly defined targets. And these are what I said, the numbers, the measurable targets that could really bring us to a more sustainable future. I don't know if you want me to go into the details here, but one of the main points is really in the future, by applying this type of standard or this type of idea, will actually be allowing more space activity rather than less. I mean, this is a challenge that we are facing normally in sustainability that makes everything more expensive. In space, we're really talking about a limited capacity. And if there is one debris in one place, there cannot be a satellite. Let's put it very simple. So we need to avoid that by launching one satellite, we end up with hundreds or thousands of slots being occupied, if you want. So just trying to put it very simple, this is the main core of what these targets try to achieve in different ways and by giving different hints. So now this can be done also technically. And as I said, this was a jointly work of different stakeholders that had different visions. So we ended up, I think, with a document that's quite concise, but quite precise on where we want to go. So one thing that for me is also a matter of a lot of joy is that by now we had more than 100 organizations lining up to sign this charter and to commit to this charter. Again, the charter is not legally binding, and it really tries to promote that everybody does the best they can within their respective abilities and constraints, as you can see on the screen. But I believe that there is a great merit to it because it aligns. We are being able to align efforts of a lot of organizations around these targets and trying to build up towards this. So as we close the writing of the charter, we have now initiated as ISA another initiative where we are also facilitating, and we invite you all first to please read the charter and consider joining it, of course. But we're also doing the technical, giving a technical dimension to the charter. This is the what. This is what we want to reach by 2030. Now we are defining the how. How do we go from here to there together? And so this is another co-development process that has started that we call the Zero Debris Technical Booklet. And you can also find some information. If not, you feel free to contact me if you want to join the process. So I hope I gave a good overview. Of course, yes. I'm happy to go to details if you need.
Thank you very much. I think for the short time we have, that was very good. And for me, it was actually also very interesting to see when I opened the document first and discussed it with Isabel, that it's just really a very short document, right? And now I'm very curious to see how the technical handbook that you just mentioned will come alive. And I think for all of us, it's now very important that not only the organizations, but also the states put this into their whole industry. So if they start making policies around how we go into space and how we can attribute and actually make this charter work for us as the state, as a spacefaring nation, how can we do it? And I think, Abir, it would be cool if you could give us some more insights on how states could implement those principles now. How could foresighted policy mapping help us with that? So we can dig a bit deeper in your insights on that. What do you think?
Sure, I'm happy to share whatever I can share with you. First of all, thank you for having me here. For me, it's a huge learning to listen to Tiago and my co-speakers who spoke before me. It's really very, very much interesting as a lawyer. Listening to such an expertise is a huge pleasure. So yeah, I can just talk from my perspective as a lawyer or a policy and regulation advisor. How can what you just said is perfectly right, is like how can states or governments in that case make policies of regulation in a way to make, for example, this zero charter debris happen or include into their national regulation. I think my colleague who was Ahmed said before, he talked also a lot about the guidelines on an international level, which needs to be translated in national regulation, right? And this will be the biggest challenge for every country to translate these guidelines into their national regulation. And also he mentioned that there is a difference between like countries with thousands of satellites and countries who just want to start to be a player in this space economy game, let's call it, which will also need a completely different approach to regulation. So the countries with thousands of regulation would rather or would be more open to focus on sustainability or protection, let's say, rather than these countries who just want to start out. Like we work with our advisor country who's also starting out to become a player in this field, and there is the problem that they care less, let's say, about this sustainability. They just want to kind of speed up and just be do everything to have a say in this field, or to have at least few satellites launched. So there is again a difference between countries, and therefore also you can see a difference in regulation within these countries. And although we have on international treaty level many treaties or few treaties, I don't want to say how much of it, 9. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. And these needs to be translated on a national level. And on the national level, we have also not much national regulation. I think Brazil, UAE has a lot of regulation. We work, for example, very intense with the UAE together with the with the local authorities there for regulation. So, okay, this was just an introduction and explanation how law and regulation plays a role. But how can legal transformation, basically that what we do, contribute to that, is by helping governments or space agencies, if established, as Ahmed mentioned, to envision the future we want to have, just like the future without space debris, and to build on preparing now a legal structure which will avoid more damage in space, let's say. So how are we going to do that? In having a different approach, just like using different technologies, just like Bella did, which is using a DAO for an alternative to law, which is for insurance purposes. So these are approaches which can be also used by countries and governments, but there's a long way to go, and collaboration, as Tiago mentioned, is crucial. Absolutely.
I fully agree. So for what is always very interesting for me when we talk about policymaking in this space, especially for us as Space Debris DAO, when we are like an alternative version of cover or insurance for your satellite, one thing that baffled me was that usually launch states do not specifically require, or only very few like Finland require, an insurance. How would you recommend towards us how we should potentially move the launch states to having certain technical requirements regarding sustainability, how we could bring them to understand that it's quite interesting for them to have insurance requirement in place, which helps us and also Lloyd's and Beasley in the long term?
Thank you, Benjamin. I think insurance is a key point, is critical, because we are one of the major stakeholders in any space project, and as I said earlier, we're enabler of most satellite project. I think many countries at the moment are conscious that space sustainability is an important problem, and an important problem to tackle now, not in the future, but to tackle it now, especially as the pace of the space economy increase and the number of launches, as being said earlier, is increasing. So we are definitely stakeholder, and as such, I think we have a strong role to play. There are many initiatives, and I've seen effectively the charter that you've demonstrated. We are also part of another initiative, which is led with the UK Space Agency, and the UK actually has been very, very active in its role and wants to take a leading position in the sort of multilateral approach, because in the absence of any perspective of international treaty at the UN, for obvious reason, the multilateral approach and the approach from the example of the Artemis Agreement is being effectively now being worked. And the UK, again, wants to be a leading actor. And we are based in the UK, and Lloyd's is one of the major financial assets of the UK. So we are participating into this initiative. So this initiative is called the Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative. And they have adopted a memorandum of principle on space sustainability, and of which we are one of the major contributors and one of the signatories as well. And in the UK as well, there's been the Space Act, is basically requiring all commercial activity from the UK to obtain a license, and one of the requirements of the license is to have insurance. And the insurance effectively covers a number of potential damage, including debris or collision or damage on the ground or in space. And this is a requirement. And the UK is not alone. Most of the European countries now have similar requirements to prevent effectively abusive forum shopping. Most countries in Europe have fairly uniform requirement in terms of insurance, at least for the launch. The US has that as well for launch, and many sort of Asian countries, Japan, Singapore, Korea, have similar requirements. So all in all, most of the spacefaring nations have sort of adopted this posture, but obviously more needs to be done, because the insurance requirement is just one element in space sustainability. I think what is being discussed now, and again, the UK is trying to lead, and there is an initiative which is being strongly supported by King Charles III, is the Astra Carta, under which basically there is to add to the license requirement space sustainability objectives. And the idea is to have effectively objective criteria and parameters, like effectively tracking, identification, capacity to maneuver in space in order to obtain a license, and potentially to facilitate the obtention of insurance. And again, where insurance could influence, commercial approach toward sustaining better approach for space sustainability, is through incentive. So there are several incentives, and the major one, in my view, is insurability. A satellite which is seen as not able to maneuver, which is basically a brick in orbit and non-disposable and posing a danger, would not get insurance going forward. And if you don't have insurance, you're not getting a license, and if you don't get a license, you can't launch, basically. So that's a major incentive, and other incentives are possible as well in order to further comply with those parameters. That could be effectively effect on price, effect on condition as well. So that's the sort of the arsenal that we can use to influence toward better sustainability in space, because that's our interest, for insurance company to have a more benign space environment, but that's for the interest of the satellite industry overall as well, and for humanity as well. If we want to keep access to space, and I think that's the major danger. People sometimes confuse, Earth sustainability and Earth pollution with space pollution. Space pollution is not a concern for health or for life. It is a concern for access to space, which is a major block of space, of life in the future, and for today and for future generation as well. So I think that's what we're trying to do. There are multiple initiatives. I would welcome effectively a rapprochement among all these initiatives. I know there are initiatives toward collaboration, but we could be effectively instrumental, because ensure again are the center of the overall sort of satellite industry. So we could play our part there as well in rapproaching various initiatives to increase efficiency and quicker development. And we're happy to do that. And we're also looking forward to make sure that there is effectively a strong private and public cooperation. I think with the absence of a UN solution in the short term, I think private-public cooperation and multilateral approach are a key option. Thank you very much.
Dennis, I have a follow-up on that.
Okay.
I would like to know, do you still insure bricks, or do you already have requirements in place that say you have to be, I don't know, maneuverable, you have to have a certain sustainability in place? Or will it just mean for you, if I go to you, then it will be more expensive if I have to insure a brick?
At the moment, very few companies still consider satellite or flying bricks, if you want. No propulsion now is basically less an option for various reasons. The regulation, the pressure for the industry, from the industry and from the government, but mostly is part of the best practice within the industry now. And there is this kind of peer pressure. So we see less and less of satellite without propulsion. That we see a maturation of the small sat industry toward bigger size. And if you have bigger size, that means you've got bigger volume to accommodate propulsion and tracking technology. So that's a good thing. The industry is self-correcting. And I think it's self-correcting because of incentive from insurance, but not only from insurance, from other parties as well. So that's a very good thing. Nevertheless, I think we're still seeing some projects which are sort of thinking about not having propulsion, but even when they don't have propulsion, those people are integrating some sort of maneuver capability, like drag capability, which is obviously less efficient and less fast than propulsion, but still some maneuver capability. So I would say overall that the number of absolute brick is actually fairly small today. That's a very good thing, very good development, and probably disappearing, in the next months, if not weeks. We're seeing less and less of those, and I can foresee that those won't be able to obtain insurance in the very near future.
Yeah, and I hope with the establishment of the Zero Debris Charter and then the technical handbook, hopefully containing things like you have to be able to maneuver, you have to have a deorbit strategy, you have to potentially have an option to dock and then refuel. All of those things will help us a lot. So I want to give the word now to our last participant, last but not least, Leo Labs. You guys are doing space data. We all have heard the name. You're very famous in the industry. And I would like to know from you, how can Leo Labs contribute to actually reduce the debris in space?
Yeah, sure. So maybe to put things in perspective, the growth of the number of objects launched in LEO has been doubling every 2 years. So and that has been going on from 2015. So we are looking at Moore's law in low Earth orbit for 7 years now. So any solution that we have as an industry today, if you have catalog coverage, if you're tracking, let's say 20,000 objects today, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, if that system cannot scale with the same pace, then your service is falling behind. And that is the problem that we're in today. So at Leo Labs, we're focused on two things. One of them is scaling the data so that we don't have gaps, we don't have a degradation of service. The other thing is providing more insights. So how can operators be smarter in making decisions? How can they learn more? And our mindset really is constellations are not the problem, they're the victim. They're the victim of the environment that they are operating in, of the debris, the rocket bodies, and so on, a lot of irresponsible behavior. So when we think about constellations and we take the names of SpaceX, OneWebs, and all of the rest, and the number is growing, that is a symptom of economic prosperity in LEO. So that is what makes us in the industry. And we need to make sure that it continues and basically reduce the business risk. And the largest business risk for those constellations is actually an orbital collision, because that can cause a severe blow to a company's assets and so on. So we're trying to provide the foundation, and the foundation comes in the form of data. And really, I would stress on data, because if you look at insights or policy or insurance, anything really, a product or a discussion, you need data to back it up. And when it comes to data, you care about two things. You care about transparency, and that is really important. If I give you an example of spacecraft, usually operators don't usually report publicly when they have an orbital failure, or when they are sometimes get, maybe a collision, maybe a subsystem failure, and so on. There's no transparency in reporting, and we usually hear about it after 5, 7, or 10 years, and so on. So there's a delay in market knowledge of what actually is going on in LEO. So we need transparency in that point. We need, of course, we need spacecraft that can maneuver. You can't just operate irresponsibly with constellations, and especially in certain altitudes where there's concentration of collision risk. The point that we focus on at Leo Labs is transparency and quality. So when we provide our platform, we make sure our partners and our customers can actually deconflict some issues. They can share data, and they can share complete data without hiding things, without hiding the uncertainty or the raw measurements and so on. So in a summary, that is what we're focused on. We look at the growth in LEO as a great indication of this is only the start of the space industry. We're really looking at the foundations. You have constellations as a utility, you have launch business, transport layer, you have communication and cloud being really the things that piece it together. And the thing that has been generally falling behind is mapping and safety services. And under that, we look at policy, we look at a new generation of insurance or refined insurance products and other opportunities that exist today. And industry needs to not just work on it, but they need to work fast, because Moore's law doesn't wait for you. If things are doubling in orbit, if assets are being launched twice as much every 2 years, then any solution that you have today, if it doesn't scale, if you're not working at the same pace, then you're falling behind. That's really the message and the mindset that we have at Leo Labs.
Without data, we don't know if we have to act, change course, or whatever we want to do to avoid any damage. So it's definitely something that's very important. More damage would cause more debris flying around, so it's all not good for us. I would say first round done. We would now be open to questions from the audience. If we have any, we can go on with those. Otherwise, if you feel more comfortable posting them in the chat, you can also do so. To any one of the panelists, feel free to ask us hard and tough things about the Zero Debris Charter or whatever we said so far. You can also unmute your microphone and speak up if you feel like it. And if we have some more time for you guys to prepare for a question, I can drop in one more into the direction of Thiago and maybe Abir, which is when we talk about the implementation from the Zero Debris Charter, which is a very small and open document, how long do you guys think it will take us to get the technical handbook in place and then the states and the organizations to actually commit to it, so we show effect of it? What do you think?
So I can start. I think it will not be step by step in a way. We are working on the technical background of it, as you say. In ESA, we already did the first step on putting out a set of requirements, technical requirements. This is a much longer document, I have to say, where we, with all the different measures we imply in our satellites. And this is the first step towards this vision of 2030, okay? So it's gonna be evolving progressively until we make zero debris possible technically. On the technical side, we hope to have the first version of this technical booklet ready this year by November, so 1 year after the publishing of the charter. That's the goal, and we are working together with the community to do so. The next event is in person in Germany, Darmstadt, in June, end of June. So you can also register if you're interested to participate. Now, on your question on how states can adopt it, and I want to point out that as it is, the charter is giving a vision. The way it is implemented by each organization or state, it's really up to the state or organization, as long as it goes in a similar direction. And that's what the charter is trying to do, is to say these are commonly agreed targets that we should aim at. And if we all aim at that, we are contributing to space sustainability. How you do it it's really welcome to have even different approaches, because I think we'll learn from each other. There are some states that are already lining up also to states and national agencies, in particular in Europe, that have already lined up to sign the charter. So this is happening, and then they will have to flow down this in their own strategy and in their own policies or regulations. So I think it will happen at different speeds in different places, also depending if there are new actors, old actors. Also on the point that was raised before, we are also working a lot with states in the perspective of creating this harmony that was mentioned before by one of the speakers. And in particular, for example, we know UK has been working very actively on this, and we really appreciate they have a bit of a different approach than others, so more industry driven and thinking in these incentives, which we think is quite important and maybe key to make this happen, this transition from a vision to an actual implementation by states and not only by private entities.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. So we have a first question from the audience. Abir, do you still want to say something regarding the last question I had? Otherwise, I don't want to cut you out.
No, all good. I think Tiago summarized it pretty well. I mean, the technical requirements will be provided by them, but I absolutely agree with him that it will depend on from country to country. The implementation or the adaptation will depend on how far is the country already in launching satellites, or how because countries contribute to something, or contribute to a treaty, for example, or implement a treaty because also they want others to do the same. So to build pressure, kind of, or an agreement upon different countries. So the more advanced I am in space economy, then I am more interested in regulating myself also as a country. And as he said, countries who just starting out, and as I said before, won't have that interest. So it will depend. But we hope more sooner than later. And I think our work starts where your work, Tiago, ends. We will try to convince them.
Perfect. Then Eric, I would hand it over to you. Maybe you want to state your name and who you're working with and ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin. My name's Eric Blackhurst. I'm Plainwave Instruments VP of Business Development. And here attending today, both because of a professional and personal interest in space debris management. But what Plainwave does is manufactures telescopes and gimbal systems. We have involvement in supporting astronomy, space situational awareness, relative to satellites, laser communications, as well as aerospace and defense applications. But that being said, I want to thank everyone, for coming. This is really good to see. Just the amount of attention that this is being given, by intelligent people that are committed to cleaning up the problem. And, while I don't really expect any answers here from the webinar today, I would love for anyone that has an interest in trying to solve the problem of locating debris and characterizing its orbits to reach out to me, especially if you feel that the hardware that you need isn't currently available from industry. That's something that I'd really like Plainwave to be able to help solve. And as I think most of the audience knows, there are literally millions of pieces of space debris already in orbit, and most of it is unknown in terms of its location at any point in time. So that's it, everyone. Thank you.
Very good. So I have seen that we have 2 more questions in the chat that came in writing. One was from V, who asked basically if the space debris solution development, I guess that is removal, right? Active debris removal solutions, that she means, is something that more smaller companies or entrepreneurs will take into their hands instead of established companies, because they think it might be a very risky development and they don't know if enough money will be made with that. Dear panel, please feel free to take the question.